Hi, everyone. Welcome to Summer EBT Deep Dive, Creating Lasting Databases, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, FRAC's Communications Manager. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, click the CC button in the bottom taskbar and select English as the spoken language. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time during the webinar, please use the Q&A panel. With that, I'll pass it off to Kelsey Boone, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Kelsey.
Thanks so much, Steve. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, where we're going to be talking about databases and data practices. Next slide. I'm going to quickly go over our agenda for today. We're going to start with new database guidance overview from USDA, and then we will move into a presentation from Code for America on best practices for statewide databases. And then we'll move into a presentation from Victoria Schmalz from Michigan Department of Education on what it looks like in a state. Next slide. So really quickly, I'm just going to go over a brief landscape for this upcoming summer. So in 2024, as most of us know, 37 states, 2 ITOs, and all territories ran the Summer EBT program. And in 2025, the numbers planning to participate are 38 states, 5 ITOs, and all territories. Just to note that Tennessee did participate in 2024, but has chosen not to run in 2025, and Alabama and Utah have opted in after not participating in 2024. Next slide. Just some brief reminders about 2025. Right now, technology grants are available for state agencies and ITOs, but the application deadline for those is January 15th, and that is $1.1 million in unmatched funds for the state agency and for the ITO running the program. Another deadline is February 15th, where states must submit their plans of operation and management for the Summer EBT program. And some new requirements in 2025 that were not requirements in 2024 are the statewide databases, which is one of the things what we will be talking about today. And then the other is a statewide Summer EBT application. And I invite you all to register for our January 23rd webinar, where we will be talking through some best practices around statewide applications. Next slide. This is just a list of some of FRAC's resources. We do have a Summer EBT webpage, including a page for families and a page for advocates. We also have a variety of other materials that could be helpful in the Summer EBT implementation and outreach. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brianna from USDA to talk through some of the new guidance.
Thanks, Kelsey. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brianna Ostrander, and I am an analyst with the Summer EBT team in Child Nutrition Programs at FNS. And today I'm just going to walk through our recently released Summer EBT NSLP/SBP database requirement document. Next slide, please. So before we jump in, let's take a quick look at the basis for this requirement. So to facilitate a streamlined process for determining eligibility, Summer EBT agencies are required to establish and maintain a state or ITO-wide database of children who are enrolled in NSLP or SBP participating schools within the state or ITO for the purposes of enrolling eligible children who submit applications for Summer EBT efficiently and with integrity. The requirement for the establishment of a Summer EBT database can be found in our regulations at 7 CFR 292.12c. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's just jump right in. We have about 7 commonly asked questions. Our first one is, what information does the Summer EBT database need to have? So at a minimum, each child's record has to include the child's name, their birth date, the school/school district, their address, their free or reduced price eligibility status, and any other information the state or the ITO deems necessary to issue benefits timely and with integrity. So some examples of that additional information that a state or ITO might deem important to add might include something like a student ID number if they have it, maybe a parent or guardian name if they, depending on what type of matching they use. And then I know some states, maybe they use phone numbers as their 10-digit code. So those are some examples. Next slide, please. Okay, so how can I tell if my database meets the program requirements? Generally, the Summer EBT database requirement is met if your database supports the function described in program regulations, i.e. enrolling children for Summer EBT benefits and detecting and preventing duplicate benefit issuance. Also, you can use an existing database or existing network of databases to meet this requirement, which some states have found to be really helpful. So in general, you can tell that your database meets the regulatory requirements if 1, all NSLP/SBP free and reduced price children within the state or ITO are streamlined certified. 2, the benefits are issued for all children within regulatory timeframes. And 3, children who attend NSLP/SBP schools are not issued duplicate benefits. If your state or ITO meets these 3 key points, then your database meets the requirements. Meeting these requirements proves that your state or ITO has a fully working database because it shows that you're able to meet these streamlined certification statutory requirements, and that you are enrolling eligible children efficiently and with integrity. Next slide, please. Okay, so another commonly asked question is, what agency is responsible for the database? In many cases, states have more than one Summer EBT agencies administering their program. So each agency that administers Summer EBT is responsible for the aspects of the database that they described in their interagency agreement. And as a note, these responsibilities can be shared. This might be especially helpful if your database is a network of different data sources, which might be housed within different agencies and connected, like with an API. When deciding with which agency that database should be housed, some EBT agencies should consider things like, where does most of your data come from? What agency processes your applications? And what data privacy laws do you have in your state or ITO that might affect how you can share or transfer that data? Due to privacy laws, in some cases, it might be easier for the database to reside within the education agency that houses the Summer EBT NSLP, SBP enrollment data. But generally, we just recommend that you carefully consider what will work best for you for your unique situation, because there's no one size fits all approach. Next slide. Okay, so the next question is, how can the database be used to facilitate an enrollment check with the database if it's not housed with the agency that processes Summer EBT applications? The Summer EBT agency processing applications must find a way to connect information from the applications, for example, the child's name, their date of birth, to the agency that houses the database. In our database resource, we provide several examples of options for this type of situation. And in all of the scenarios listed, the state education agency houses the database. So, for example, a couple of these are the Summer EBT agency processing applications will send information from the application to the state education agency. The education agency would then check the database and send back a yes or no answer for each child to indicate whether they're enrolled in an NSLP SBP school within the state or ITO. And secure file transfers or shared drives could be used in this option. Another option is that the Summer EBT application is linked directly to the database. When the agency that is processing the application receives the application data, the yes or no enrollment confirmation is already there and ready for the state or ITO's review. Next slide, please. Can I use an existing database for Summer EBT? The answer to this is yes. If you have a compliant database that already exists, you might not need to build a Summer EBT specific database. This database also doesn't need to be exclusively used by or built for the Summer EBT program, as long as it can provide data to support confirmation of enrollment in an NSLP SVP participating school, and also prevention of a duplicate participation among children attending those schools. Next slide. Okay, are there confidentiality and use requirements for the Summer EBT database? It's a pretty commonly asked question. And the answer is that Summer EBT agencies are responsible for ensuring the confidentiality of the information in the database. Data collected or housed in the Summer EBT database or in one shared with other programs is to be used exclusively for the administration of these programs or for providing other social services benefits to eligible children when allowed by those program regulations. Next slide. Okay, and so our final question is, can states and ITOs share data from their Summer EBT database with each other? In cases where an ITO administers the Summer EBT program to a service area within a geographic state that is also administering the Summer EBT program, the state actually must share the relevant enrollment data in a timely manner so that ITOs have access to the necessary information to issue benefits within their service area without delay. A key part of state and ITO coordination related to the timely transfer of student eligibility information from the state Summer EBT agency to the ITO I apologize. A key part of state and ITO coordination related to the timely transfer of student eligibility information from the state Summer EBT agency is to the ITO Summer EBT agency. So the state Summer EBT agency must share student data with the ITO, including student eligibility status and contact information of children deemed eligible within the ITO service area. The state Summer EBT agency must provide this information in a manner and timeframe that will allow the ITO Summer EBT agency to issue benefits timely. The Summer EBT agency must ensure the confidentiality of all student data exchange that is applicable to Summer EBT program eligibility and dual participation, and data must only be used for program purposes consistent with the database requirement. Next slide, please. Okay, so that concludes the review of the Summer EBT database requirement commonly asked questions. If you want to find more Summer EBT resources or review the database guidance for yourself, just scan this QR code and you'll get access to our Summer EBT link tree, which has tons of links that you can search through. And I think that this guidance is the fourth one down right now. Don't quote me on that. And then if you're looking for more technical information, I will not steal their thunder, but check out the Code for America Summer EBT database requirement guidance document that you can find on their website. And with that, I will turn it back to Kelsey.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And just a reminder that you can use the Q&A function to submit questions, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation after all of our speakers have presented. Next slide. And now I will hand it over to Vince Story from Code for America.
Thank you, Kelsey. Let's just go ahead and get started. Thanks for that wonderful presentation. I think we can skip my first two slides. They're around the IFR and the recently released database guidance. I want to say that to me, the new part of that is the idea that one can have a network of databases that was explicitly called out. And that I think is worth addressing. So I've kind of taken the focus of my content here and thought about what a network of databases might look like. As mentioned, we have a resource on sort of databases in general that's up and available, but let's talk a bit more about networks of databases because I think that mirrors the reality of many states and ITOs. So first off, what is a database? I think within the guidance, within everything we've seen, there's nothing specific. There's no singular technology so that agencies will be able to meet, provided they hit those 3 bullet points. You don't need a big, expensive, sophisticated solution. Whatever gets the job done is a database. That said, you, of course, can use something more sophisticated if it helps you meet other goals. So next slide, please. What is a network of databases? So that's, again, not specified. It can kind of go along a hierarchy of complexity that meets your reality, that meets your program goals, and probably also meets your interagency relationships. I think that's really going to be the driving factor there. So it could be as simple as 2 spreadsheets that you are able to access at once. You've got your like streamlined cert case, you've got your student enrollment, and you're able to hit that student enrollment and add cases to the streamlined cert if they're FIP certified, and then also process your applications. As long as you can do all of those things, you have a network of databases, again, meeting those 3 bullet points. Or it could be fancier solutions. And we'll talk a bit about why you might want that. So next slide, please. In all of this, I think it's important to really focus on what you want to do with data. And that's going to really, in particular, drive your the use cases you outline in your, say, data sharing agreements. I might say I want to have a data pipeline that comes from education that goes to SNAP for this particular purpose, for identifying my streamlined certified kids that are not already known through SNAP, TANF, or Medicaid, right? So I need to be able to identify the fields I need for this particular purpose. And I might have another relationship that's used for a different use case. So what are the use cases of data as we share it between agencies in Summer EBT? Well, there's identifying those streamlined certified kids. You have to have some way to check school enrollment for applications. You're going to need to be able to deduplicate. That's going to have consequences for the specific fields that you share. And then you have to actually, get cards out the door. And then finally, and I think this is something that's tricky when it comes to data sharing, you need to be able to allow families to identify themselves and authenticate and say, hey, I am who I say I am. And therefore, you can go look at my case information, or you can see other privileged bits of information about me that the data flows for that might not map to what you would ideally like. Next slide, please. So this is just one hypothetical set of relationships. And this is one that's, I think, that we've seen a drive towards among some states and ICOs, but has some consequences. And the idea between this is your education or your child nutrition agency kind of owns their student data. And they protect it to the degree that, like, we're only going to export what we need. So we're only going to export those FRP cases for streamlined cert, and we're going to keep all the application in-house. Well, that means the only thing that goes over to my card vendor or goes over outside of the education or child nutrition agency are people who are going to get Summer EBT. So this is sort of like a maximum privacy perspective, and complies as literally as possible with FERPA and everything else. But there are some downsides, right? Your CN agency now needs to be able to host that application because they're going to be the ones who are checking enrollment. Maybe they don't want to host an application. I think we've seen that in some places. And as I mentioned, customer support gets really awkward in a scenario where like this, where all the case information is stored at another agency, but the information that you need to verify a person or to authenticate a person lives at CN. They might not send over everything to the Human Services Agency or the SNAP agency. So when someone calls in, who are they calling in? So now you need to decide how to, you don't want to refer someone to another agency when they call you once, saying, oh no, they have your info. That's frustrating for everyone involved. So this is one model. I think we can talk about solutions to that, but let's move on. Next slide, please. So again, framing it in terms of use cases, what did that arrow that went from CN to Human Services that involves streamlined certified data need to include? Many people are sending over everyone who's been directly certified. Completely understand that. Literally, you just need to send over people who are certified for, have applied for FRP meals or otherwise have other source categorical eligibility that are not going to be known at the state level, because the state should be able to resurface, your SNAP, your TANF, your Medicaid, and everyone else who has a direct other source connection. But in addition to those people, you need to be able to send over the data fields you need to deduplicate and the data fields you need to actually mail a card. So if as you're writing your DSAs, you don't need to have a full universe. You don't need to say, I want everything you have. It's a very, for streamlined cert, it's a pretty specific set of data. Next slide, please. School enrollment, this is trickier in that this data lives very close to the application. It is something that you need to be able to check pretty quickly. Oh, we have a question in the chat. No, parents who apply do not need to be authenticated. Your application is just submitted. There's no authentication component to that. If you want to obtain additional support with regards to, say, I was Streamline certified and I want to check the mailing address I have on file, or I want to change the mailing address I have on file, under those scenarios, you're going to need some proof so that you are sensitive to private information that people have and potential fraud related to redirecting cards. Okay, so for checking school enrollment, this is a different data demand. Streamline cert, you need to basically send over a bulk data transfer. It's not going to happen very often, right? You can do it more than once, but theoretically, there's a bulk set that goes near the beginning of summer or the end of the school year in time to get the cards out the door. School enrollment, again, you have to meet your application window requirements for people who apply during the operational period. So it's a much more sensitive turnaround for something like this, where if I want to house everything in CN, I need to be able to get it over to Snap. So you're probably going to set up something that moves data a little more quickly for this. And you do have a slightly different set of fields. You're going to need to know someone's school in order to match their school for enrollment. You don't really need that to issue cards for Streamline Cert. They might not have a school. So, next slide, please. This is something that's come up quite a bit in basically everyone we talk to. How do I know which mailing address to use? I think the ideal version of this is when we transfer data, we're also saying when we got an address. I've never met anyone that had that, but that would be great. What we see most commonly is in establishing some sort of hierarchy of what we think is the most accurate based upon what our clients will need. If they have a Medicaid recert, then they're going to have some address associated with that. You get into really tricky scenarios. It's best if you know your data. If you have schools near the border of your territory state that people tend to give incorrect addresses to, you will know that, and you have to factor that in. You see, maybe some cases we use the school more frequently than we use the SNAP or the Medicaid. I will say that the second ideal is let's run an experiment. Let's try out different things in different areas and see which has a different undeliverable rate. That takes a fair bit of work. If you're interested in doing that, please reach out. I think we would be happy to do that with you. Because that knowledge is a little bit elusive at this point in time. Next slide, please. Okay, customer support. I mentioned that you might need to authenticate. I will point out that you can likely figure out whether or not you need to apply, family needs to apply, using just school directory information. So there's a pathway to accessing that doesn't involve authentication. That might mean that you can do a smaller amount of data sharing among agencies and not have to really put someone through an identification ringer. So, next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked a bit about some of the pathways that need to go through. One thing I've seen many agencies do that I think is perfectly fine is let's just throw a file at someone between one agency and another. You'll be uploading a daily export via a secure FTP server. It's really easy to set up. You probably already have an FTP server running somewhere in your orgs, I think in both of your agencies. It isn't ideal for, I mean, I think the reasons everyone experiences when they use something like this, you have to coordinate, oh, when the file come in, the file didn't come in, I got to call someone. Um, if you can directly connect your databases, you have a lot more flexibility. Maybe that flexibility is bad, but you can poke around. You can say, how do I structure this query to be able to use it to work with my cases? Can I do everything directly in my database? There's an efficiency gain there. There's fewer tools that are being used. But if you are going to directly connect your databases, you might have to go to your IT and say, hey, we need to expose a little bit of something to the internet, and we're just going to make sure they can only talk to each other. But every time you do something like that, it's a little bit of a security risk. So you have to think very carefully about that. Next slide, please. All right, another hypothetical arrangement. This is one that we've seen that is when you don't want the application housed in the same place as the student database. How can you achieve something like that? This is, again, this sort of network of databases where what we're going to do in this scenario is we're going to have, when an application comes in, we're going to try and query, is this person a student? And we're going to isolate the student database component from those applications, so I never have to send my full list of students outside of CN. So again, this is like a maximal privacy solution from that perspective. Okay. So as I mentioned on the slide, it's much easier to do customer support because you have all of the case information and mailing address and all that in one place. But how can you actually implement that enrollment checking? So next slide, please. And then we're going to talk about the idea of an enrollment API. And this is something that people have mulled over. I don't know that I've seen it literally implemented as of yet, but I would imagine that someone has done it. And that's where the owner of that student data establishes a service that can simply answer a yes or no to, is this person enrolled or not? It's usually some sort of web service that there's no reason that it's publicly available. It's available just to the application host, but it does address that privacy concern. I've heard that if you say API, some people's procurement alarm goes off, or this has to go through various agency procedures. So if you cannot say API, sometimes it's better. It doesn't have to be an API. You can set this up as some sort of procedure in a database where the procedure is the only thing someone can run, and all it does is answer the question yes or no, is this student in that database? It's not an API in that sense. It is just a question and answer service for, do you know this student? Now, I will highlight this looks ideal in terms of privacy, but it is quite complicated in terms of, I want to be able to identify those applicants when they enter a messy name. So I need to be able to stand up something that can do probabilistic fuzzy record linkage based just on you sending me some PII there, and be able to give back, I probably know you, or I know you well enough. And that's a little awkward when you don't look at everything all in one place. I will say, trying to use an implementation like this for other data connections in Summer EBT is not going to be ideal, because as we know for Streamline Cert, the goal is to identify everyone who is able to be directly certified, whether or not they're a student. So the idea that I'm going to look up by question and answer, no, I really want the full list. I want to have a comprehensive set of people who are able to receive the benefit. Next slide, please. So as we get to the end, I thought I'd share a few more kind of way out there ideas. If you are having trouble obtaining trust among your agencies to perform the data sharing that you need to accomplish your goals, there are additional technologies that can be used. You can do record linkage across agencies in a way where neither agency is fully aware of the records that are being linked. And you can do so even with fuzzy matching. It's harder to do, all right? You need to, get in some fancier tools there, but it's still possible. So it's still possible to do this and abide by all privacy regulations, abide by like even to the most extreme interpretation of them. I would say you probably need to pull in some outside expertise for something like that, but it is indeed possible, and I'm happy to talk about the solutions to that in greater depth. You're sort of at the bleeding edge of what is easily done. You have to get some really custom code set up. So next slide, please. Okay, I want to have just a little bit on the practicalities of this. I would say the most important thing if you're going to share data among agencies is to document what everything means. And that literally the interpretation, or I've removed these accents from this database, or this is the first name and the legal last name, or like all last name, or how many middle name, like all the particularities that someone else is going to need when you send data to them, just make sure that it's all written down. Otherwise, sanitize your data and assume the absolute worst. It's just habitual to believe that you're getting messy data, even if you actually trust and like the people on the other end of it. And then finally, last slide, please. Just some key takeaways. As was mentioned, there is no one size fits all solution to this. So whatever you end up doing, I imagine will be because of those particularities, because of the relationships you have, and because of the legal interpretations that you're working with. There are technologies out there that you can use to obtain better solutions. Really working through that data sharing agreement and getting it to the best place you could possibly get it to is going to give you the best solution. And then I come back to the idea of, well, what do I literally want to do with this data? Let's keep focusing on what are those actual outcomes. What does Streamline Certified need? What does application enrollment need? What do I need to get cards out the door? And what do I need to provide customer support? And if you go back to the IFR, and if you go back to the database guidance, you'll see that is what drives it. Get those things done. And you can write your DSA, you can write your implementation or your business requirements according to those outcomes. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vince. Great information. And again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A function, and we will move on to our final speaker from Michigan Department of Education. Victoria, take it away.
Thanks, Kelsey. As mentioned, my name is Victoria Schmalz. I am a summer EBT specialist and for the Department of Education in Michigan. And I'm here today to talk about what we're using for our summer EBT database. So before I get started, a key point in this process for us is the partnerships that we have here in Michigan for implementing summer EBT. So the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, or MDHHS, is acting as the lead agency for summer EBT. The Michigan Department of Education is the partner agency. And then all of our student level data is provided by the Center for Educational Performance and Information, or CEPI. So that's really the crux of the conversation here today, is that student level data that's provided by CEPI. These relationships that we have between our three agencies are critical for the success of the summer EBT program, and they have been getting closer as we've gone through this process. So the Michigan Student Data System is an application that is hosted by CEPI. This application is used to collect student data for all students, PK through 12 and then beyond in Michigan. Using the Michigan Student Data System, or MSDS for short, helps us to leverage existing student data collection processes for summer EBT, rather than incorporating a separate manual process or recreating the wheel. So there are existing data collections within MSDS that we're using for summer EBT. Those are what we call general collections, which happen 3 times a year in the fall, in the spring, and at the end of the school year. The early childhood collections, so that involves the pre-K programs like Head Start, and in Michigan, the Great Start Readiness Program. And then also our non-public school student roster collection, which is for non-public school students. So we're able to access the information provided in those collections to pull down potentially eligible students for summer EBT. So there's quite a bit of data that's collected by CEPI in MSDS and in other school-related collections. But some of the relevant data that's collected at the student level for summer EBT is shown on the screen. So that includes the personal demographics of the student. So their name, their UIC, which in Michigan is their unique identification code. So that's just like a unique student number in Michigan. The student's date of birth, their gender, their contact information. So we collect both physical and mailing addresses for students if they have both. The supplemental nutrition eligibility component is where schools report if a student is eligible for free or reduced price meals based off of their free and reduced price lunch application. And they can also report there if a student is eligible for direct certification based on extended eligibility. We also collect the student's homeless demographic information, as well as anything, any early childhood information that the student is involved in. Again, this is just a short sampling of the information that is collected by CEPI, and that also that we use to identify eligible students for summer EBT, but just to give you an idea. One big thing with data is ensuring the accuracy. And I just wanted to point out that CEPI has an entire robust system in process already that's been working for them for a very long time to ensure that the data is accurate. And they do that through their data quality team. So they have policies, processes, and practices that control their data and ensure their quality. One of the ways that they do that is they send data quality emails. And those emails are generated 2 to 3 times per collection. And they're sent directly to those that are submitting the data at the school level to say, hey, there may be an anomaly in this data that you reported. You might want to double check just to make sure these numbers are correct. CEPI never says to a school, this is wrong, but they might say, last year you reported 200 students with an S&E of 1, and this year it's only 50. You might want to take another look at your data before it's certified just to make sure that that's accurate. And those emails are usually enough to prompt the data reporters at the local level to take a look, make sure there were no misreportings in the data to make sure that that's all correct. And then there are more than 10 data quality emails currently that are either direct cert, S&E, or economically disadvantaged related. There are many, many different data quality checks, both internal and external, that CEPI runs on these processes. So they already have that built in to make sure that what's being submitted is correct. So how does this tie into summer EBT? FERPA and summer EBT regulations drive our data sharing capabilities. As Vince mentioned, there's lots of different ways to do the data sharing process. So what we have worked on in Michigan is that the data is transferred from CEPI to MDE using a secure file process. So they send us the entire record of students that attend a national school lunch or school breakfast participating school. MDE then takes that information, filters out those students that are eligible based on their free and reduced price lunch information submitted, and then also those categorically eligible students. And then we send that file securely to DHS for issuance. DHS then has their own record of students that would be streamlined certified through their processes. They match those two lists together to make sure there's no duplicate issuance, and then the issuance happens on the DHS side. So kind of a mix of what Vince was talking about before. The data flows pretty seamlessly. I mean, we're in our second year of the program, so we're working out some kinks still. But I think we've got a pretty good system going right now of getting the information from what's reported to CEPI from the schools to the final issuance at DHS. And I also wanted to note that we are working to automate that process. So we're working to have the systems kind of talk to each other to take out that manual file transfer, obviously while working within the constraints of all the regulations we have to follow. So I just wanted to throw this in kind of at the end. There are disadvantages and advantages of using the information that we have, but we're really, what's the word? My brain just stopped working, I'm sorry. So we're really lucky in the sense that we have the CEPI data and information. It allows for us to have quick access to the data that we need. It allows for seamless reporting, not only to MDE or DHS for summer EBT purposes, but for other federal and state level purposes of student data. It can allow for informed decision-making for the folks that are using that data, the enhanced data security. So CEPI has, their processes very locked down for who is able to access the data and for what reason. And that in turn goes to MDE and then DHS as well. Enhanced accuracy, I talked about the CEPI data quality process that they have in place. There are also data quality activities that MDE performs on this data as well as the DHS side. So we all just kind of help each other along the path with those processes. And at the end of the day, that all equals improved student outcomes, right? We're helping to streamline the process of getting eligible students and families the benefits that they're entitled to, which is, good for everyone. Okay, and that's the end of my little section here. So questions, can look through the chat. I wasn't looking at it just now. And then if you have anything that comes up later, my email address is also on the screen and I welcome any questions.
Thanks so much, Victoria. There is actually a question in the Q&A function for you. Just as a reminder, we are reaching the Q&A portion of our webinar. So if you do have questions, please put those in the Q&A. So this question is, do non-public students receive an ID number in Michigan?
Yes, they do. The UIC, again, is what it's called here in Michigan. So any student that's put into the Michigan Student Data System receives a UIC before they can be entered into a collection.
Thanks so much. I do have a question for Vince. If a state were just trying to figure out their database, they were brand new to the whole process, what would you say are the first step or few steps that a state should take to start moving towards having a statewide database?
We're talking just about the statewide database, the student statewide database as defined by the IFR. Again, the database itself can be quite simple. I think the first step is to identify where's the data coming from. The first step is whether or not, wherever I'm going to put it, what is the data itself? Because once you got that data collection and aggregation process defined, putting it in a database isn't the hard part. The hard part is, how do I get it from all the schools? How do I harmonize it so that everything, all the values line up, that things have the same meaning? If I'm collecting date fields with different formats and last names and first names and all that, how do I get people to actually upload it to me? So that to me is the first step of how do I aggregate all that data? And then once you have it, literally stick it in a single file, put it in a off-the-shelf Postgres database, put it in whatever your tech team is comfortable with, and that will meet the requirement. Now, how do you use it? And that's where you go and you talk to your lawyers and you say, how do we hammer out that DSA to make sure that wherever it needs to live, it lives there, and wherever I need to get, to use it, I can get it to where I need to use it at the same time.
Thank you so much. I think this next question may be able to get some help from USDA, but it is my district's student information system includes free reduced price lunch data, so can it be considered a summer EBT database? Go ahead, Brianna.
The answer to that is it depends. It depends on what else it includes. It could definitely be a piece of the database. There's a lot of working pieces to that, and at the baseline, it needs to include those. I think it's those six requirements, and the free and reduced price lunch is just one of those.
So what I will also add is that, so these databases that we're talking about are not necessarily like specific district databases. They are for a statewide summer EBT. That is what the requirement is. It's not for every district to have their own summer EBT database. It's at the state level. So just a clarification there as well. All right, I think we do not have any more questions. So I want to thank all of our panelists so much for joining us today, and hope everybody has a great rest of their day. And like we said before, this recording and this slide deck will be sent up in a follow-up email within the next week or so. So, all right, thank you everybody and have a great day.